What happens when one of Hollywood's most beautiful men looks at beauty itself? Paul Newman spent a lifetime surrounded by the most admired women of the 20th century, faces that defined eras, icons shaped by lights, lenses, and legend. Yet those famous blue eyes were never drawn to surfaces alone. Newman wasn't interested in collecting beauty or being dazzled by it. He was searching for something deeper, something that revealed itself slowly rather than demanded attention. A longtime friend once said that Paul Newman understood women in a way most men simply didn't. He didn't see beauty as something to conquer or possess, but as something expressed through character, intelligence, restraint, and presence. In an industry obsessed with youth, illusion, and constant validation, Newman was quietly drawn to self-possession, a kind of beauty that doesn't ask to be noticed and doesn't disappear when the spotlight fades. This is not an official list Paul Newman ever published. It is a reconstruction pieced together from rare comments, private observations, and the memories of those who knew and worked alongside him. And because of that, it reveals something far more honest than a ranking ever could. Why did certain women stay with him long after the moment passed, while others slowly faded from view? What does it say about a man when he can admire beauty without being owned by it? At the center of Newman's understanding was one constant, a beauty that was never loud, but permanent. Because as Paul Newman understood so well, true beauty doesn't shout, it stays. Every time Paul Newman talked about beauty, the conversation kept circling back to the same name, Joanne Woodward. In an industry where marriages often dissolved faster than film in developing solution, their 50-year partnership felt almost impossible. A family friend put it simply, Paul's number one was always Joanne, but why? What did he see that went beyond the obvious, beyond the camera, beyond the era's idea of a bombshell? When Newman spoke about other beautiful women, he sounded like an artist discussing aesthetics, admiring form, presence, style. When he spoke about Joanne, something in his voice changed. It became quieter, more intimate, almost reverent. Newman once explained it in a line that still feels startlingly modern. Her beauty wasn't loud, it was permanent. It didn't announce itself the moment she entered a room. It revealed itself in layers through intelligence, wit, and a steady sense of self. He joked about fidelity. Why go out for a hamburger when you have steak at home? But those close to them knew it was shorthand, not the reason. Was he defending marriage or describing a devotion that deepened with time? He told a journalist that the first time you met Joanne, you might think, yes, she's very attractive. The 10th time, you realized you were in the presence of someone extraordinary. That slow revelation mattered to him. Joanne was beautiful without being defined by beauty. She was a serious actress with artistic integrity, an Academy Award winner before Newman was someone who didn't need attention to feel real. In a town built to manufacture perfection, she carried something rarer, self-possession. Their marriage wasn't untouched by storms. Newman's drinking created tension in certain years, and the death of their son Scott from a drug overdose in 1978 tested them in ways most couples never face. Yet friends who knew them later remembered catching Paul looking at Joanne across a room sometimes in their 70s with an expression of absolute wonder. It wasn't nostalgia for how she looked when they were young, it was appreciation for who she was at every age. So, what kind of beauty survives grief, time, and Hollywood's obsession with youth? Newman seemed to believe the answer was simple: beauty that evolves rather than fades. A partner whose attractiveness deepens with shared experience, intellectual growth, and the marks of living. That is why Joanne wasn't merely first on his list, she was the standard that made the list possible. When Paul Newman worked with Grace Kelly on The Left-Handed Gun in 1958, he met a woman already halfway out of Hollywood. Having recently married Prince Rainier III of Monaco, Kelly was finishing her final film obligation before retiring from acting to become Princess of Monaco. On a set that was usually loud, frantic, and chaotic, she moved with a composure that made everyone else seem slightly out of control by comparison. A crew member remembered Newman calling her the kind of woman you can't forget 5 minutes after meeting. What was it about her that stayed? Newman's admiration wasn't limited to her face. He focused on the quality behind it: self-possession. While many beautiful women in Hollywood worked hard to command attention, Kelly drew focus without effort. Newman later described her as silence in a loud room. How could quiet confidence feel so powerful? How did she make disorder look unnecessary? Even before she spoke, the room already seemed to listen. That composed elegance wasn't a studio trick. Raised in a wealthy Philadelphia family with strict ideas about propriety and conduct, Kelly carried refinement as a genuine expression of character, not an act. A film historian noted Newman once said she was the only actress he knew who seemed more natural as a princess than as a movie star high praise, because it suggested her dignity wasn't borrowed from the camera, it was already hers. What impressed Newman most was how her beauty operated independently of surroundings. Many actresses look their best under perfect lighting, makeup, and careful cinematography. Grace looked remarkably consistent in every context. People who worked with her said she looked the same walking through the commissary at lunch as she did on screen. Elegant, cool, regal. Most beautiful women are at their best in controlled environments. Grace didn't need context. Whether under studio lights or in daylight, she carried the same clarity. Newman noticed that rare match between what Hollywood showed and what real life confirmed. For Newman, Kelly represented a particular American paradox, democratic values paired with an inherent nobility that made her transition to European royalty feel almost inevitable. Her appeal wasn't just in features, but in the consistency between outer presence and inner character. In a business built on illusion, Grace Kelly felt like something real quiet, controlled, unforgettable. And that is why, in Newman's mind, she wasn't merely beautiful. She was incomparable. If Grace Kelly felt like silence in a loud room, Elizabeth Taylor was the woman who detonated rooms. Paul Newman crossed paths with Taylor more than once, though they never made a film together. And what struck him wasn't only her legendary beauty, it was the volcanic energy that seemed to radiate from her. Newman admired her intensity and those famous violet eyes, a genetic rarity that made her gaze almost hypnotic, but he also recognized that her appeal went far beyond any single feature. Newman reportedly said, "She didn't enter the room, she detonated it," after an industry event where Taylor was present. There are beautiful women who want to be admired from a distance. Elizabeth wanted to be experienced up close, to make everyone near her feel something, whether it was attraction, intimidation, or envy. In a Hollywood culture that often packaged women into untouchable perfection, Taylor was all presence and heat, daring you to look away when you couldn't. What Newman respected most was her refusal to be managed. While many stars of their generation worked hard to conceal problems or vulnerabilities, Taylor lived openly with her complications on display. Multiple marriages, health struggles, shifting weight, and passionate causes. She faced pain and illness publicly, and Newman found that courage extremely beautiful, volcanic, a friend recalled, beautiful in a way that burned. Authenticity, to him, mattered more than polish. He was particularly impressed by how she treated time. In an industry obsessed with preservation, Taylor didn't fight aging with desperation or disappear once youth faded. Newman once said she was the only star he knew who seemed to actually enjoy growing older. Instead of shrinking from each new chapter, she absorbed it, letting every phase become part of her identity. So what kind of beauty survives when the studio illusion cracks? For Newman, Elizabeth Taylor represented beauty with backbone, extraordinary physical allure, yes, but also a fearless willingness to be seen, unfiltered, in every season of her life. She wasn't careful, she wasn't contained, and that was precisely the point. Long after the lights dimmed, what remained wasn't just the violet eyes, it was the life behind them, still impossible to forget. She kept commanding attention and respect, even when Hollywood expected women to step aside. Newman didn't romanticize her chaos. He admired her honesty. In her, beauty wasn't a mask. It was a force that demanded you feel something. Always. When Paul Newman worked with Sophia Loren in Lady L in 1967, he encountered a kind of beauty Hollywood rarely knew how to categorize. What struck him was not simply her physical appearance, but the remarkable self-possession she carried with her. Newman once said she had the kind of face that makes you forget your own name, but even that description failed to capture what truly set her apart. Unlike many international actresses who softened their accents or reshaped themselves to fit American expectations, Loren never did. She remained unmistakably Italian, her voice, her curves, her temperament, and her intelligence fully intact. She did not try to blend in or make herself smaller. In an industry that constantly evaluated and criticized women's appearances, Loren moved through Hollywood with an ease that suggested she had no interest in approval. Newman reportedly commented after attending a premiere that when Sophia entered the room, every man in it became irrelevant. What made her extraordinary wasn't simply how she looked, but that she never seemed to need anyone's validation. Her confidence did not demand attention, it rendered comparison meaningless. While many beautiful women worked to command focus, Loren exuded certainty without effort. He admired that she was an actress first and a beauty second. Unlike stars who carefully guarded their image, Loren used her face freely. She laughed broadly, cried openly, and allowed herself to appear disheveled, aged, or emotionally exposed if the role required it. Newman respected that willingness to risk imperfection in service of truth. To him, that artistic integrity made her beauty feel more authentic rather than something carefully protected. Sophia Loren represented a different ideal from the American standard of the time. Where Hollywood often favored thinness, restraint, and controlled glamour, Loren embodied a more European understanding of beauty, one that embraced maturity, strength, and lived experience. She was unapologetically womanly and intellectually sharp, uninterested in adjusting herself to make others comfortable. Newman observed how easily she carried that confidence in every setting. Most beautiful women, he noted, depended on lighting, styling, and controlled environments. Loren appeared the same walking through a studio hallway as she did on screen, elegant, grounded, and complete. Her beauty did not change with context because it did not depend on it. For Newman, Sophia Loren embodied beauty without negotiation. She did not ask to be admired, explained, or excused. She simply existed fully as herself. In a career filled with extraordinary women, that kind of self-contained presence made her unforgettable not because she demanded attention, but because she never needed it. Although Paul Newman never worked directly with Brigitte Bardot, he was acutely aware of her impact on cinema and on how beauty itself was understood. Bardot represented something entirely new in the late 1950s and early 1960s, a natural, seemingly untamed beauty that broke sharply from the carefully constructed glamour that had dominated film before her. Newman once remarked that Bardot had a raw, undone quality, as if the usual rules simply did not apply to her. What made her revolutionary was not only how she looked, but how she carried herself. Before Bardot, even the most beautiful actresses projected a careful restraint, every movement controlled, every expression managed, always aware of being watched. Bardot appeared to move without that awareness. She seemed unconcerned with polish, composure, or approval. After watching And God Created Woman, the film that made her an international sensation, Newman reportedly observed, "She wasn't polished. She was hypnotic. Most beautiful women in cinema," he believed, appeared to ask for admiration. Bardot did not. She moved like someone fully inside her own experience, not performing beauty for an audience, but simply living within it. This unself-consciousness set her apart from the studio-era ideal. Where earlier stars relied on meticulous styling and controlled environments, Bardot appeared spontaneous and uncontained. Her hair was often tousled, her movements unrefined, her sensuality unguarded. Newman admired how she seemed to forget the camera entirely, a quality that created a completely different kind of appeal. Bardot's influence extended far beyond her films. Her look, minimal makeup, emphasized eyes, loose hair, and casual sensuality reshaped fashion and beauty standards throughout the 1960s. She became a visible harbinger of the sexual revolution, signaling a shift in how female desire and autonomy could be expressed. Her beauty suggested freedom rather than performance. For Newman, her significance lay in that freedom. Bardot did not appear managed by studios or constrained by expectation. Her beauty was not preserved or controlled. It existed naturally, in motion and instinct. In an industry built on artifice, that kind of unfiltered presence felt radical. Brigitte Bardot embodied beauty without rules. She did not replace old standards, she ignored them entirely. In doing so, she changed what beauty could look like on screen, not something perfected for others, but something lived for oneself. Among all the women Paul Newman admired, Audrey Hepburn represented the greatest departure from conventional Hollywood beauty standards. In an era dominated by voluptuous figures and overt sensuality, Hepburn's slender frame, delicate features, and ballerina-like grace created a completely different kind of appeal, one that Newman found quietly mesmerizing. What struck him was how her beauty operated. While most Hollywood beauty demanded attention, Audrey's drew people inward. She didn't announce herself, she invited you closer. Newman noticed that difference immediately. Studio executives had once worried that her appearance was too unconventional, too far removed from the Marilyn Monroe ideal that defined the 1950s. Yet it was precisely that difference that made her unforgettable. Newman praised her eyes, saying they looked like they had seen another world. There was something in her gaze that suggested depth beyond her years, a quality shaped partly by her difficult childhood during the war in Europe, but also by an innate sensitivity that never left her. That combination of vulnerability and wisdom made her beauty feel layered rather than decorative. Unlike many beautiful actresses, Hepburn never used her appearance as a form of power. She consistently downplayed her looks, redirected attention toward her work, and later toward her humanitarian efforts. Newman reportedly said, "She didn't flirt, she floated." While most stars moved through space, aware of the effect they created, Audrey seemed to move with lightness, as if passing gently through the world rather than trying to dominate it. That quality only deepened with time. In an industry that often discarded women once youth faded, Hepburn did not fight aging or retreat from public view. She allowed herself to change naturally, shifting her focus toward humanitarian work with UNICEF. Newman once said she was the only beautiful woman he knew who became more herself as she grew older. Where other stars seemed diminished by age, Audrey appeared to grow into her truest self. Her compassion, restraint, and quiet dignity became inseparable from how she was perceived. For Newman, her beauty could not be reduced to features or measurements. It was character made visible. Audrey Hepburn embodied a kind of beauty Hollywood rarely understood, one rooted in humility, grace, and inner life rather than spectacle. She did not demand attention, and she did not resist time. She simply became more fully who she was. And for Newman, that made her unforgettable. Although Paul Newman never made a film with Loren Bacall, he encountered her presence often enough to recognize something immediately different. What struck him was not simply her beauty, but the extraordinary confidence she projected from the very beginning of her career, a confidence that transformed her from attractive to formidable. Newman once remarked on her voice and her eyes, saying she could unnerve you with a single glance. Even at 19, in her first film opposite Humphrey Bogart, Bacall appeared completely self-possessed. While most young actresses of the era projected eagerness or adaptability, Bacall radiated certainty. She did not seem impressed by power, nor intimidated by it. That confidence was partly cultivated. Director Howard Hawks famously coached her to lower her voice and reduce unnecessary movement, shaping the cool, restrained persona that became her signature. But what began as technique quickly fused with Bacall's natural intelligence and wit. The result felt authentic, not manufactured. Newman reportedly called her the most dangerous woman in a cocktail dress, a phrase meant as admiration rather than provocation. Bacall's power did not come from overt sexuality or conventional prettiness. It came from control of herself, of her space, and of her presence. She did not ask for attention. She commanded it through restraint. Unlike many actresses of the 1940s and 1950s, whose characters were defined by romance or dependence, Bacall consistently portrayed women with agency, intelligence, and clear boundaries. From her very first scenes, she stood as Bogart's equal rather than his accessory. Newman admired that balance of strength and composure. She didn't try to be beautiful, Newman reportedly said. She tried to win, and did. For him, Bacall represented beauty as strength made visible. Even decades later, he felt her presence remained remarkably modern, untouched by the passage of time or changing trends. In an industry that often rewarded compliance, Bacall embodied a different ideal. She was controlled without being cold, elegant without fragility, and powerful without spectacle. Newman recognized that what made her unforgettable was not her looks alone, but the uncompromising character behind them, a beauty rooted in certainty, discipline, and self-respect. When Paul Newman encountered Ali MacGraw in the early 1970s, Hollywood was quietly changing. The polished glamour of the studio era was fading, replaced by a desire for something more natural and emotionally honest. MacGraw arrived at exactly the right moment, embodying a new kind of beauty that reflected what audiences were beginning to want. What struck Newman about Ali MacGraw was her rawness and vulnerability. Her beauty did not feel constructed or carefully maintained like that of earlier generations. It felt discovered rather than designed. Newman admired how openly she conveyed emotion. Without the protective distance, many beautiful actresses developed to shield themselves from exposure. Her breakthrough role in Love Story in 1970 made her the face of this shift. Unlike the composed, untouchable stars of the past, MacGraw appeared emotionally transparent. Newman reportedly said she had eyes that made men rethink their entire lives. What he meant was not simply attraction, but the immediacy of feeling visible in her gaze. MacGraw did not hide vulnerability. Everything she felt seemed to appear instantly on her face. That openness created a rare intimacy with audiences, especially in romantic dramas where emotional truth mattered more than technical perfection. Newman recognized that her appeal came from that willingness to be seen without armor. She looked like heartbreak before it happened, Newman reportedly observed after watching Love Story. Most beautiful actresses, he believed, work to conceal vulnerability, treating it as a weakness. MacGraw did the opposite. She made vulnerability her strength. For Newman, her emergence marked a clear evolution in beauty standards. MacGraw represented a move away from the controlled perfection of the studio system towards something more human and accessible. Her beauty was not rooted in flawless features, but in the authenticity visible beneath them. He felt she arrived at precisely the moment audiences were ready for that kind of honesty. Her appeal reflected a broader cultural hunger for sincerity, emotional realism, and truth. Newman did not see her openness as fragility. He saw it as power. Ali MacGraw embodied beauty as emotional transparency. She did not dominate a room or command attention through confidence or control. She invited connection through feeling, and for Newman, that ability to let emotion show without defense made her unforgettable in a Hollywood that was learning how to change. Looking back at Paul Newman's reflections on these women, what emerges is not a conventional list of the most physically perfect faces in Hollywood history. It is something far more revealing. Newman never spoke about beauty as a static quality. He saw it as something alive, shaped by character, intelligence, courage, and the way a woman moved through the world. From Joanne Woodward, whose beauty deepened with time and shared life, to Grace Kelly's composure that felt almost otherworldly. From Elizabeth Taylor's volcanic intensity to Sophia Loren's unshakable self-possession, from Brigitte Bardot's rule-breaking freedom to Audrey Hepburn's quiet grace, from Loren Bacall's controlled strength to the tragic vulnerability of Marilyn Monroe and the moral clarity embodied by Ingrid Bergman, each woman represented a different expression of beauty, not a single ideal. What makes Newman's perspective remarkable is that he never separated appearance from substance. He was married, he was faithful, but he was not blind. And yet, what held his attention was never surface beauty alone. It was authenticity, women who did not need permission to exist as they were, women whose presence felt complete rather than performed. In an industry obsessed with youth, illusion, and control, Newman's understanding of beauty quietly resisted all three. He admired women who aged without disappearing, who lived openly with contradiction, who carried dignity without demanding admiration. For him, beauty was not something to be consumed, it was something to be recognized. These women were not unforgettable because they were flawless. They were unforgettable because they were fully themselves. And through Newman's eyes, beauty becomes not a standard to chase, but a truth to notice, one that lingers long after the image fades.